So today's lesson is going to be part 2 of the lesson that we began on the Hebrew concept of meditation and then the symbolism of fig tree. Now I would suggest, if you haven't had the opportunity, to go through part 21a, the one that's on meditation. The Hebrew word is hagah. So if you haven't done that already, I would go back and watch that one first. This one, especially when we get to the end, will make more sense if you do that. We're working our way through John 1:47 to 51, and we've been talking about Nathanael under the fig tree. And we were asking the question, what does that mean? So here you can see that as Jesus is talking with Nathanael, he's going to say to him, this is where Nathanael says, "How did you know me?" Jesus is going to respond to him and say, "I saw you under the fig tree." And then later it's repeated, under the fig tree. And what I've suggested is that this idea of under the fig tree means that you're sitting underneath a rabbi, that in the first century this had become an idiom for sitting underneath a teacher. Now, the fig tree symbolism is very important for ancient Israel, plus it's multi-dimensional. So a few weeks ago, I showed you a fig tree, a picture of a fig tree at Capernaum. And one thing we noted about that was that the fig tree has big, broad leaves, and in that hot sun of Israel, it makes a great place to sit, for a rabbi to sit with his disciples, all underneath the fig tree, and it keeps them out of the sun. So that's one idea, that the rabbis would sit underneath that fig tree. To take it even further, though, the rabbis noted that the Bible itself is like an orchard. It's full of good fruit. And that fig tree provides natural sweetness in the first century. So the fig tree becomes a symbol of God's word, his goodness, his sweetness. But the thing is you have to be able to not only grow and tend the fig tree, but you have to be able to find the good fruit. And that's where a teacher comes in. So the teacher helps you find the good fruit in the Bible. And then if you want to go even further on the fig tree metaphor, the teacher itself is like, the rabbi is like a fig tree, because the student is attempting to pick the fruit of the rabbi. So the teacher's wisdom, right? The teacher gives the student insight into the nature of God, into something in the Bible, into the human condition. And so all of these come together in this rich metaphor of fig tree that was so important in Israel. So this is why scholars have suggested that when Jesus says this to Nathanael, he basically said, "I saw you before with that other rabbi." And so what I want to do today is take that idea of rabbi as fig tree, and I want to go deeper, give you a more solid foundation of where they're pulling that from in the Bible. That's what we're going to do today. So we're going to talk about human beings compared to trees. And one of the main verses that's not only rabbi and fig tree, but also you can just consider it to be like the idea of trees, is where we're going to start, and that's Proverbs 27:18. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you from the NIV, and then we're going to break it down. Okay, so the NIV says this. It says, "The one who guards a fig tree will eat its fruit, and whoever protects their master will be honored." Now, what we want to really get at here is we want to figure out what is this proverb writer really communicating? Because this is the parallelism of a proverb. So we're going to compare this verse up here with something about this verse down here. And to do that, we have to make sure that we have the most accurate rendering of the underlying Hebrew. And so there's two words in here that we're going to see can be difficult or are difficult for translators. It's the Hebrew word. It's not difficult to know what it means. It just has a wide semantic range. So when you go from Hebrew to English, you have to select a particular English word that makes the most sense for what the proverb writer is trying to communicate. So you have the one who guards, we'll look at that word guards, and then you have this idea of protects. Okay? So let me show you how we know that our Bible translators are having difficulty with an appropriate English word. So the way you do this is you have to look at multiple translations. So I pulled 4 different translations: English Standard Version, the New International Version, the New King James Version, and then the International Standard Version. And this is going to help illustrate so you can see what I mean. Anytime you go in, you look at a verse and you look at like 20 different translations and you find that they're varying in different ways, it means that the underlying Hebrew might be a little bit ambiguous, or they're not exactly sure what English word is going to communicate the best here. So if I start with the first half of the verse, this top line, and we go to the ESV, the English Standard Version, it says, "Whoever tends a fig tree will eat its fruit." Okay? Now let's go NIV. "The one who guards a fig tree will eat its fruit." New King James, "Whoever keeps the fig tree will eat its fruit." Notice they're not having any problem with fig tree will eat its fruit. It's this word right here that they're having difficulty with. So tends, guards, keeps. "The one who nurtures the fig tree will eat its fruit." Okay, that's the International Standard Version. Now, by the way, this word right here is natsar. So natsar is the same word that you get the village of Nazareth from. That can also mean branch, but here we're looking at the verb. Okay, second one is this one. We'll look at the second line now. Let me change pen colors, and then that way it'll stand out a little bit more. Okay, "And whoever guards his master will be honored. Whoever protects their master will be honored. He who waits on his master will be honored. Whoever obeys his master will be honored." And so again, you can see guards, protects, waits, obeys. And we've got this variance. And now, when you're reading a proverb, it's always the second line, which is the main point. So what the proverb writer is not trying to do, he's not concerned with how do you grow a fig tree. He's worried about something about your master. Okay, and that, by the way, if you look at Luke 8:24, master is what the disciples called Jesus. So rabbi is another term for one that's greater than you. So they call Jesus master. So that's a very common thing. So, okay, let's go look at these two words right here. Let's start with natsar. So this is the verb natsar. And it can mean to watch, to guard, or to keep. Now, how do we know which one, right? Well, it has a semantic range, and we have to look at the object of the verb that it's acting on. So we could say, okay, we have this word natsar. Okay, so we have this verb natsar, and what we're going to do is look at the object. Okay, so if the object were sheep, then you might say somebody was keeping or guarding. If it was, say, the valley below, so you build a city up on a hill, it might be guard, because that's what the city is going to do. They're going to guard or keep the valley. But here, what is our object? Well, it's a fig tree. And so, what is the idea of watching a fig tree? or guarding a fig tree or keeping a fig tree? Well, in order to get the fruit from a fig tree, you have to, in English, do what we would call tend. You tend a garden in order to get the vegetables or the fruit. You attend to the fig tree. I mean, one thing you have to do with fruit trees is you have to prune them. You help get rid of all of the excess so that the fruit becomes more prominent. And so if we say guard a fig tree, well, does that mean you stand there with a weapon? No. So in English, guard doesn't really make sense. But to tend a fig tree, because what we want to do is eat its fruit. And that's going to take some time and it's going to take some work in order to get the fruit. So in this case, if we go back here, it's really, I'd say the ESV got it right, tends, because then that's the idea of you're working with a plant. Here, nurtures is getting closer rather than guarding, but even then I think tends is more accurate. Now, let's go to the next one. Because here we have guards, protects, waits, obeys. So which one is the closest one? Well, let's go look. So the Hebrew word is shamar. And the basic root of shamar is to exercise great care over. It is variously translated to keep, to guard, to observe, or to give heed, pay attention to. So again, we'd say, what are we? So shamar, and what is our object? Well, if it were sheep, then you would be keeping or guarding. Maybe you're guarding from the wild animals at night. Or now notice that keeping sheep is exercising great care over, but that includes a lot of things. Feeding them, taking care of their medical issues, carrying them if they have a hurt leg, but also protecting them. So you could be guarding, but you also could be keeping. So now we go, well, what about the master as the object? So do we have to protect the master? Do we have to guard the master, like we're guarding him with our life? Well, maybe in some situations. But what if we closely observe, right? Closely observe or pay heed. What word might go along with closely observing what your master tells you to do? And it could be obey. And the one who obeys his master, the one who's going to follow through with what the master's telling you to do so that fruit comes out of it. Because in both of these, what's unwritten in the Proverbs, the goal is exactly the same. You're trying to obtain fruit. So if we go back to our list here and we say, okay, he who guards. Now, shamar could be guard, but do you have to guard your master? Protect your master? Wait on his master. So this almost seems like the New King James is thinking like a master and servant, slave. But I like the International Standard Version down here. Whoever obeys his master is going to be honored. Jesus is encouraged. He's going to honor you when you follow through with what he's telling you to do. So, I mean, unfortunately, the NIV, I think here completely misses the point. Guard and protects. And that gets really confusing because I read the NIV and I don't know what it means to guard a fig tree or to protect a master. But I do understand tending a fig tree to get the fruit and obeying a master. So if I were to create my own translation, which I did right here, I would just say whoever tends a fig tree will eat its fruit, and who obeys his master will be honored. Now, this is where they get the idea that a rabbi is like a fig tree. Because this is what you're going to do. This master, Adon, could be, in the first century, rabbi. And when you pay heed, close attention, obey the rabbi, you're going to be honored, and, oh, by the way, you're going to end up with fruit. Okay, so that's where this is the main verse for where you get rabbi and fig tree, but let's just talk about in general. Human beings as trees. So throughout the Bible and the ancient world, human beings are compared to trees, but more specifically to fruit-bearing trees. That's why Jesus says, you will be known by your fruit, or they will be known by their fruit. So that's the tree metaphor, right? God is a vine dresser. He plants a vine. Jesus is the vine. You are the branch, the one who holds the fruit. But in order for you to get to produce fruit, God's going to prune the vineyard. So we are inside of a fruit metaphor. So if you happen to go to Google and you Google Bible, people, trees, you will most likely see the very first thing that pops up is this one right here, Deuteronomy 20, 19 and 20. So I'm going to look at that one real quick. And this is going to underscore, in particular, fruit trees. Now, before I read this, I just want to let you know, if you read a commentary on this passage, it's going to be noted that it's not straightforward Hebrew. It's not straightforward to translate. And that means that it can be understood, properly understood, in multiple ways. And so the rabbis are debating it. They have different opinions. But the idea is we're talking about laws that govern war. And so in the ancient world, they would lay siege to a city. When you besiege a city for a long time, making war against it to take it. This is how you would fight your enemy. God says, you shall not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. For you may eat of them. Well, which types of trees can you eat from? Fruit trees. And you shall not cut them down. And then it's this verse right here. Now they make this into a question. For is the tree of the field man, that it should be besieged by you? Now this is debated. So it's this verse right here, this little portion, that not everybody agrees with exactly this. Now, we're not going to get into the reasons why, but the reason I want you to know it is if you go Google Bible, people, trees, and it comes up and it says Deuteronomy 20, verse 19, and then you see next to it, for man is a tree of the field. And so certain rabbis have said this is how this should be translated. Not a question, but a statement. For man is a tree of the field. Now, tree of the field is a fruit-bearing tree. So this is the main verse for comparing a human being to fruit trees. Okay, now, what I did, because there are many comparisons of human beings to trees, I put a bunch of them together here. So this is a handout that you can find at our website and download it yourself. It's just for your consideration to see the many ways that human beings and trees are compared. But we even have contemporary language that compares our lives to trees, right? Someone might say, I'm rooted in a particular part of the country, right? My roots are in East Tennessee or something like that. We all have a family tree. There are branches to companies. I mean, the metaphors are everywhere. And then Jesus even says, how are we going to know the authenticity of your faith? It's by your fruit. So you're supposed to be bearing fruit. Okay, let me go back. Oh, one thing about trees is trees have a very special symbiotic relationship with human beings. So God forms human beings out of the earth, out of the dirt. Trees come out of the dirt, just like a human being in Genesis 1 did, and we rely upon one another. So it's important to recognize that when God created us, he said he took man out of the earth, right? And we know that there are minerals that our body needs to function that are inside the earth. But the one thing that we can't do is reach down and pick up a glob of dirt and eat it in order to get those minerals. Those minerals do not get into our body because of if we just eat the dirt. Our digestive system doesn't work that way. So how do we get these minerals into our body? Well, they have to be filtered through the roots of a tree, up the trunk of the tree, and then eventually out to where the tree can produce a fruit. And now these minerals get into this fruit that we can then ingest into our body, which then gives us nutrition. So we rely on this tree for that. Now you could also say the same thing about, let's say, oxygen, right? So oxygen, the tree kicks out oxygen, and the oxygen is what we have to take in. We kick out carbon dioxide, CO2. And what does the tree ingest? That carbon dioxide. So we have a symbiotic relationship. Trees are vital for human beings to live here on earth. And that's just pretty cool how God made us connected. So one thing to note is in the Old Testament, the only natural object that the Bible compares people to is trees. So countries can be animals, tribes can be animals, like the tribes of Israel. But when it gets to individual human beings, the comparison is to trees. So we'll see in a minute, Psalm 1:3 compares certain people to a tree. You have Isaiah 11. This is a messianic chapter. Talks about the stump of Jesse. And Jesse is David's father. So the stump of Jesse, and that's olive tree imagery. Jeremiah 17 talks about a tree that'll bear fruit. Psalm 128:3, you have both a vine and olive metaphor. The trees are like people. The trees sing for joy in Psalm 96. And then everybody, I think, knows the Isaiah, the trees clap their hands. Now this actually is trees of the field. Trees of the field are fruit trees. So just many ways that the Bible compares people to trees or trees to people. Okay, so now we're going to get to this main one, Rabbi as fig tree. And what we're going to look at is Psalm 1:1-3. And Psalm 1 is going to compare, well, let's read Psalm 1. So, blessed is the one who does not walk in the step of the wicked, stand in the way of the sinner, or sit in the company of mockers. But blessed is the one whose delight is in the law. That's the Torah of the Lord. So blessed is the one who's focusing on the Torah and who meditates, and this is what we did last week, why you have to see that previous lesson if you haven't. The one who meditates, hagahs, on the Torah day and night, which basically is a way of saying never stop meditating on the Torah. So the person who meditates, hagahs, on the Torah, that intense, passionate on the Torah, is like a tree planted by streams of water. Is it any old tree? No, it's a fruit tree, which will yield its fruit in its season. So very important passage to say, when you hagah on that Torah, you become the fruit tree. And it's so important. Jesus wants us to bear fruit. How are we going to do that? Well, we have to know our Bible, in particular, the Torah. So then we would say, who's the main person there in that first century Israel that is hagahing the Torah? It's the rabbi, the great teachers of Israel. Because in order to be able to teach forward and backwards and upside down and from every angle, that rabbi has to hagah the text. And when the rabbi has all of this hagahing the text, they have fruit to share with their students. And this is what you're supposed to do as a student, is pull the fruit of the rabbi's wisdom. So you can see there's no great leap from this psalm right here to an idiom that would compare rabbi to fig tree. Okay, let me finish by giving you a little bonus round. Okay, we're going to talk about this idea of hagahing, this intense meditation on the text and the Hebrew Bible itself. God wants you to hagah, meditate. Okay, so we have to think about the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible, that's not our Christian, the way it's not organized like our Christian Bible. So the Hebrew Bible has 3 sections. It has the Torah. This is the teaching. It has the prophets, that's neviim, and the writings, ketuvim. And when you're speaking with a Jewish person, in order to give the Hebrew Bible the respect that it deserves, you refer to it as Tanakh. You don't want to say it's old, because it is still relevant, and saying Old Testament makes it sound like they haven't upgraded to the new one yet. Tanakh, that's what it's called. Now, Tanakh doesn't really mean anything except for it's an acronym. T for Torah. These are the 3 sections. N for neviim, for the prophets. K for the ketuvim, for the writings. So the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, has these 3 sections. That's how everything's broken up. And so what God wants us to do is to hagah the Torah. Okay? And what he does is when you open up the prophets, when you open up that next section of the Bible, one of the very first verses you see is Joshua 1, 6-9. And this is where he says, "Be strong and courageous, Joshua. Do not let the book of the law depart from your mouth, but hagah on it." And so God is reminding Joshua that he is to hagah the text. Then, when you open up the writings, the other portion of it, what's the first thing you see? Psalm 1, verse 3, which says the one who hagahs the text is going to be like a fruit tree. So God is reminding us as you open these next sections of the Bible that you need to be going to the Torah. And those who hagah the Torah will be like a fruit tree. So this is deep symbolism, and it's this deep idea of meditating on the text. John, his writings are very symbolic. It carries a lot of meaning. The meanings are variable, so it's not one particular thing, but it's important for us to dig into that symbolism. And then when we see something like this, what can be a difficult teaching, a rabbi as a fig tree, what you do is you hagah on that. You meditate on it. You take it to God and say, God, show me some insights on this. Help me understand. But you take it much deeper than just at the literal level. So go out and hagah the text.